Hey everyone, Pastor George here with today's Bible study recap. And today in Bible study, we look at Judges 12. And Judges 12 tells of the end of Jephthah's time as judge over Israel. And his time as a judge does not end well, to say the least. So if you remember in the book of Judges, there's this sequence that's going on where Israel's place and their relationship with the Lord is falling. Right before Jephthah is a judge, everyone's worshiping all sorts of gods. They ask God to deliver them, and Jephthah comes as a deliverer, and he is able to do that, but he ends up making a rash oath, an oath that is not godly, and ends up killing his own daughter in a sacrifice to the Lord. At least that's how it's commonly been interpreted. And he then, and our story today picks up right after that. This story today is reminiscent to me of another story, the story of Gideon, the judge, who also has a problem with the people of the tribe of Ephraim, which is again causing problems here. And you can see at the beginning of this passage that we have today that Ephraim again questions Jephthah's leadership, right? They get upset with him about him not calling them to arms. It's very similar to what they declared Gideon had done, right? So they feel as though they should be the leaders and not Jephthah. And what this ends up doing is it ends up, instead of Gideon, right? Gideon is able to diffuse the situation. With Jephthah, though, it ends up becoming a war between Gilead and Ephraim. And the thing is, about all these tribes are descendant, Gilead, Ephraim, and Manasseh are all sons of Joseph. So it's actually kind of interesting because it's an inter-family fight of Joseph, right? The Joseph from Genesis. And so they fight, right? And they do this thing where they seize the fords of the Jordan, which is an important crossing point in Israel, and they hold it. And anytime an Ephraimite tries to cross, or anyone tries to cross, really, they'll ask them if they're an Ephraimite, and if they say no, they'll ask them to say shibboleth. And shibboleth is kind of like a tongue twister type of word, or a word that had a very certain way that the Gileadites pronounced it, and they could tell by the dialect of the Ephraimites if they could. And the way that this is in Hebrew, it's like shibboleth versus sibboleth. And so they would pronounce it with an SH, and the Ephraimites would say just kind of an S sound. And so they would figure out who it was, and they would just kill them by how they were speaking. And so 40,000, I believe, 42,000 Ephraimites die in the fighting between the two tribes, right? And then that's how Jephthah's time ends. And he judges Israel for only 6 years. And if you think about that in terms of where the previous judges have been ruling, right? 20, 40, right? Long periods of time. Jephthah is only 6 years he's a judge. And that's going to become, from this point forward, the common amount of time that people are kind of in power as judges. And things, aren't great after this. So after Jephthah dies and this war is over, you have 3 other judges mentioned. And just like Tola and Jair in a few chapters ago, these guys, Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon, are only mentioned here. And you can see that some of them are men of substance because they have like the 30 sons, 30 donkeys thing. But if you look at how they're ruling, right, 7 years, 10 years, and what's the last one? 8 years. 7, 10, and 8, right? Again, short periods of time. And this is how this is communicated, that these guys, like, things aren't going well in Israel, right? The judges aren't ruling for a long time. Things are going off the hook, and it's not great. So all of this is to say, right, is that these people, the people of Israel at this point, the tribes of Israel, are fighting amongst themselves more than anything else and not honoring the Lord. And this sets us up really well for Samson, because Samson is what we're going to get next week. We're going to start with Samson, who's probably the most famous judge, I would say, because of the stories that are usually featuring him in like children's Bibles and stuff like that. But when you read the story of Samson, not through the lens of just individual stories, but through the totality of it, you're going to see how it lines up and how he is affected by what happens with Jephthah and how that's going to define Samson as a leader, and whether or not, I mean, the good question about Samson is whether or not we should want him in children's Bibles or as someone to look up to. But we'll talk about that another time. So thank you guys for your time this morning. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and I will see you tomorrow for a new thing. Peace out.